How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 1.
Greetings, welcome. It is Eric Erickson here across the United States of America, and I am delighted to have you with me. The phone number is 877-973-7425 should you wish to be on the program. If you text Eric, E-R-I-C-K, to 33777, you get the show notes, the live stream, the podcast. Follow me around social media. I did some great cooking this week and even broke out the wood-burning pizza oven. But we got to start with the hurricane. Both. Let's begin with Milton. Milton is now a Category 5 hurricane. It is barreling towards Florida. You are beginning to hear some of the idol worshipers on social media claim that the government is controlling the hurricane. Started with Marjorie Taylor Greene, and now others have picked it up that the government can control the hurricane. What people are doing is they're engaged in idol worship, and they're assigning the attributes of God to their idols, which in this case are politicians. The politicians are the new deities, and they can steer a hurricane. Now, it is true it is rare for a hurricane to become fully formed in the Western Caribbean and then head east, but it has happened 3 other times. This is not a unique phenomenon. It's just a rare phenomenon, but it happens. And it's happening and headed towards Florida. And there are some people who would rather believe that the government is creating and steering the hurricanes than accept that maybe the world's weather is getting a little weird. Because then they got to deal with the climate change argument, and are we responsible or not? Natural, man-made, it doesn't matter. Obviously, it's hot out there in the Gulf, and this hurricane is barreling towards Florida. And we're still in the aftermath of Hurricane Helene in North Carolina. I'm going to say something. Some of you are going to say, I'm playing to the audience, telling people what they want to hear. I'm trying to be incendiary or provocative. If you're a longtime listener to this program, you know, with rare exception, I tell you exactly what I think. And I'm going to tell you exactly what I think right now. Were the victims of Hurricane Helene in western North Carolina black, the national news media would still be on the ground in western North Carolina covering the storm. But because they're rural, mountain, poor white people who are Trump supporters, all of the major news networks have largely moved on other than ancillary coverage of the storm. In Katrina, it was a white Republican president and mostly black people displaced from their homes, and every news network did their live broadcast coverage from New Orleans for weeks. This is rural western North Carolina, where it's a bunch of white people who are Trump supporters, who are killed, dead, displaced from their homes, and instead the media has gone into damage control for Joe Biden. And if you actually look at the timeline of the storm, there's a damning indictment to be made. Now, there are lots of caveats. I want to be as thorough with this as I possibly can. And I need to begin with Sasquatch. That's right, Bigfoot himself. We live in a day and age where everybody has a camera phone, and no one has been able to get coverage of Bigfoot that is anything other than a far distant grainy image. In a day and age where everyone has a camera phone and every police arrest is captured on film and armchair quarterbacked by Americans on social media, the fact that no one can actually get a clear shot of Sasquatch is a pretty big tell that he doesn't exist. There are lots of videos of people staring at cameras in North Carolina, telling you what's happening on the ground. Not a single one of them is showing you what's happening. We're supposed to take their word for it. For all we know, the background outside of their car is the Kremlin. We have no idea. I've seen lots of footage. FEMA blocked me from going into this trash dump. Well, why are you staring at the camera? Why didn't you show us that FEMA, by the way, it's not FEMA's job. FEMA is probably not doing that. FEMA's doing a lot of things. FEMA's probably not blocking access to the local trash dump because that's not where FEMA is. It's just wild that everybody's believing the stuff we're seeing on social media of these people looking solemnly in the camera from their car. Y'all never gonna believe what just happened to me. Well, you mean you have your camera there to tell us now, but you weren't actually filming it when FEMA tried to arrest you. The FEMA arrests are like Sasquatch. They sure are a lot of people saying they're happening and ain't nobody catching it on TV. And the problem here is that because these are white Trump supporters in North Carolina, the media is already predisposed to not want to cover the story. And now you got a bunch of liars on social media lying, and the media just gets to wash their hands of it and say, well, they're all liars anyway. We can't believe anything. Here's what you can believe. Here's the fact. Hurricane Helene rolled through North Carolina September 27th. On September 28th, the fallout from the storm was massive. And it was not until October 2nd that Joe Biden signed an order mobilizing the 82nd Airborne at Fort Bragg. They did not mobilize until October 3rd. And then he mobilized more on October 5th to do specific search and rescue. So you got September 28th, September 29th, September 30th, October 1st, October 2nd, 5 days later, the order is signed. October 3rd, 500 troops are mobilized. October 4th, October 5th, 500 more troops are mobilized. That's 8 days. How many people died in the mountains of North Carolina in those 8 days? There's your scandal. It was 8 days before we had full military mobilization, specifically of trained soldiers to do mountain search and rescue. The scandal is not that FEMA tried to arrest you, because FEMA didn't try to arrest you. And that overshadows the fact that there were 8 days between the storm hitting and military rescue personnel being sent to the mountains. And yes, it is absolutely true. And this is something that every single person who's upset about FEMA misses. FEMA cannot act until the governor of the state of North Carolina asks for it. Until local governments and state government ask, FEMA does not respond. FEMA is not a first responder. The first responders were the state of North Carolina and were the volunteers. And a lot of people poured into those mountains in the day after the hurricane to try to find people. But you know what they weren't? They were not military personnel trained in mountain rescue. Those people were at Fort Bragg, sitting on their hands, waiting. Here's Tom Cotton. And again, this goes to the lies. Listen to how Kristen Welker on NBC wants to focus on the lies so that she doesn't have to talk about the truth. And Tom Cotton does a great job here.
My broader question to you, I think, is about this misinformation. Do you think this is a time to put falsehoods aside, like the idea that FEMA funds are being redirected to migrants, which is just not true?
Well, it is true that FEMA and the Department of Homeland Security have been spending billions of dollars on migrants. Now, I understand some people say they're separate funds, but we just passed a short-term spending bill. It's very common for the administration to come and ask for permission to move money between funds, especially to prepare for emergencies. And second, I would note that this administration seems to have no problem finding money when they want to spend it on their priorities. When they need hundreds of billions of dollars to pay off student loans for graduate students in gender studies programs, they somehow find it. When it's trying to get helicopters to deliver food and water and cellular service and life-saving medicine into these mountain valleys, they somehow can't seem to find the money.
Exactly right. That is exactly right. They want to focus on the FEMA funding. And by the way, money was being moved around in budgets to cover illegal aliens with FEMA. It's true, even if the media's wanted to dismiss it. But somehow they could rearrange priorities to find the money for the illegal aliens, and they couldn't find the money to get the helicopters off the ground for 8 days. Now, a lot was going on, and we shouldn't be dismissive of the state. We shouldn't be dismissive of the volunteers. There were a lot of people on the ground the day after the hurricane. But here's the thing. You know, you can go to the state secretary of state and say, give me a list of every registered voter in the state of North Carolina. And they're all arranged not just by county. They're arranged by mail carrier route, so that you can follow the route of the mail delivery truck so that you're never crossing your path. How hard would it have been for Roy Cooper or the commander-in-chief of the American military to say, guys, break down each county, a group of you go door to door, and you make sure those people are okay? How hard would that have been? It wouldn't have been hard at all. But it took them 8 days to even begin. People were dying. And you can say, Erickson, what about the volunteers? What about the state? What about local law enforcement? You're absolutely right. They were there. But you know what? We pay taxes into this thing called the federal government. And the federal government has emergency resources for natural disasters. And the federal government took 8 days to mobilize those resources. 5 days initially, 3 more days to get search and rescue off the ground. 8 days. Roy Cooper has a lot to answer for, the governor of North Carolina. Why did it take him so long to get Joe Biden to do this? Because ultimately, the buck stops with Roy Cooper, not with Joe Biden, because he's the governor of the state. And natural disaster response is a state-level response. The federal government only assists at the request of the state. We had mobilization in Georgia. We had mobilization in Florida. It was quick mobilization, quick disaster preparedness, all of that. They got all the resources, but the resources at Fort Bragg or Fort Liberty sat on the ground. For 8 days, the airborne with specialists in mountain search and rescue sat on their hands waiting. Why? Again, local law enforcement was engaged. The state government was engaged. There were massive numbers of volunteers engaged. But we have specialists in mountain search and rescue as part of our military, and they're stationed in North Carolina near this area. Shut up, Siri. And they weren't engaged. Why is that? Is it because Joe Biden was on the beach? Was it because Joe Biden couldn't be bothered? You know, my watch has lost its mind on me. There we go. Could it be that the president is the leader of the government, and when the president is a dementia patient who doesn't know what's going on, everyone handles themselves? There's a telltale sign that no one's in charge. And it's this. While millions of Americans are complaining about the disaster response in North Carolina, the Secretary of State thought it was wise to get online and brag about the hundreds of millions of dollars we're sending to Lebanon. And Samantha Powers at the USAID decided she would get online and brag about the billions of dollars we're sending to Ukraine to keep the power running while the power was out of North Carolina. On the same day, Americans are beginning to complain about FEMA and the federal government response. They decide that's a good idea. That's a sign there's no leadership at the top. There is no leadership in this White House. The man is out to lunch, and no one in the media wants to ask tough questions. And the toughest question is this, and it's the one they don't want to ask. If the specialists in mountain rescue were mobilized the day after the hurricane, how many of the dead people in western North Carolina would be alive right now? They don't want to ask that question. In fact, they want to shout at you for even asking the question. But if the victims were black and the president were a Republican, every damn member of the American Press Corps would be asking that question.
Blinds.com's Cyber Monday Last Chance is happening now. Don't miss out on up to 45% off site-wide. A Blinds.com design expert can help you make the perfect selection on your schedule. We can handle everything from measure to your whole home installed for one low cost. With over 25 million windows covered, Blinds.com is the #1 online retailer of custom window coverings. Save up to 45% site-wide, plus a free professional measure right now at Blinds.com. Rules and restrictions may apply.
AI might be the most important new computer technology ever. It's storming every industry. Everybody's talking about it. Billions of dollars invested, so buckle up. The problem is AI needs a lot of speed and processing power. So how do you compete without costs spiraling out of control? It's time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud. Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI. OCI is a single platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs. OCI has 4 to 8 times the bandwidth of other clouds, offers one consistent price instead of variable regional pricing, and of course, nobody does data better than Oracle. So now you can train your AI models at twice the speed and less than half the cost of other clouds. If you want to do more and spend less, like Uber, 8x8, Databricks, Mosaic, take a free test drive of OCI at oracle.com/Erickson, ERICKSON. That's oracle.com/Erickson. Oracle.com/Erickson. Go check them out today. I have a prediction for you. Hurricane Milton is now Category 5. It's going to be a major disaster in the Tampa Bay area. I guarantee you the very same people who do not think Roy Cooper or Joe Biden should be criticized are going to attack Ron DeSantis for having sent personnel to North Carolina to help with their recovery efforts. They'll find some way to attack him. The very people saying, don't attack Roy Cooper, don't attack Joe Biden. By the way, let's not forget the National Weather Service also is somewhat culpable here because of their public tracks of Hurricane Helene had it going further west than it actually went. A lot of people were caught off guard while the private, more accurate models that the Weather Service chooses to ignore actually had it hitting where it hit. A lot of people are spreading conspiracy theories about FEMA. What's actually going on is bad enough. A listener just sent me a note. You know, that there are dumps in the Asheville, North Carolina area that actually are closed. And it's not because FEMA is blocking them, contrary to what you're reading about online. It's that the local governments have them closed because nobody can process payment for you to dump your debris. And they haven't waived payment, unlike in Florida, where Governor DeSantis actually had them rip the gates off of Pinellas County landfill because they closed it, and he was ordering 24/7 debris drop off, and they locked the gate overnight. So the state police ripped the gate off so people could keep handling debris down there. Competency in government matters. Another situation a friend of mine tipped me off to. She's friends with this lady whose church had to find thousands of pairs of flip-flops. Why? Because one of the local governments north of Greenville, South Carolina, where a lot of refugees are staying in homeless shelters, the local health authorities prohibited them from taking hot showers barefoot. They weren't allowed to open the showers in the shelter because people didn't have flip-flops. So local church had to procure flip-flops. Another one, FEMA is actually blocking people in certain areas from getting into disaster areas, wanting to catalog and inventory the chainsaws and stuff they're taking in. Now, the main reason they're blocking people is not a government conspiracy. It's that there are so many people in these critical areas where roads are washed away. They're trying to manage crowd control, and they're doing it at the behest of the state government, not the federal government. There are lots of things that are happening, but there are so many liars lying, it's made it very easy for the media to just ignore everything that is happening bad. Americans for Prosperity has boots on the ground around the country trying to mobilize conservatives to take back the country and advance common sense conservatism, whether it's common sense border solutions at the southern border or common sense solutions on school choice and competition in education. They'd love to have you on their side. All you have to do is go to americansforprosperity.org/Eric. Or /volunteer, rather, americansforprosperity.org/volunteer. Go there, sign up with AFP. They'll teach you how to go to your local government or state government and make persuasive cases about common sense conservative solutions, or even how to talk to your neighbor to persuade your neighbor. If you want to be a door knocker, they can help you with that too. They've got chapters in almost every state, so go check them out. AmericansForProsperity.org/volunteer. If you sign up with AFP today, they can get you involved in the election. They can get you involved in advancing common sense conservative policy solutions around the country. They can even just make you the most informed person in your circle of friends. AmericansForProsperity.org/volunteer. Greetings. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here. Glad to have you with me. The phone number is 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, I am happy to have you be on the program. I'm sorry. My brain is hurt over something I just saw, which we will get to here in a moment. But first, I want to take Greg's phone call. Greg, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hey, Eric. As usual, your morning commentary fired me up. And I took a look at Wikipedia. It's a little compare and contrast of Katrina and Helene. 10 days after Katrina hit, Joint Task Force Katrina was in full force with nearly 47,000 active duty U.S. military led by U.S. Army Lieutenant General Russell Honore. Yesterday, there was a day 11 after Helene, and there were 1,500 troops.
Mm-hmm.
For a hurricane that hit a 100-mile swath of the mountains where they have lost everything, roads, communications, power, water, everything. I mean, in New Orleans, the roads still worked.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just ridiculous. And then on top of that, on Friday, they announced $157 billion in aid to Lebanon. And friends and I were like, well, wait a minute. Who controls the parliament in Lebanon? Hezbollah. Therefore, who controls the government in Lebanon? Hezbollah. Who do you think is going to get this money? Hezbollah. This is so ignorant and stupid. It is beyond belief. I mean, I am so sick and tired of hearing the adults are back in charge. Well, the adult leader couldn't even remember what freaking hurricane he was talking about in the evening when he was interviewed that he visited that day. Biden couldn't even remember the dang hurricane he went to.
Right. You're right.
Oh, my God. The Republicans need to, quote, pounce on this.
Yes.
Because we're done.
It's truly insane that we're in a situation where we are. And I honestly do believe Roy Cooper, the governor of North Carolina, has to have some of the blame here because he's in charge of requesting 100%. the assets. Like, for example, Kathleen Blanco in Katrina requested every asset possible from the federal government. Roy Cooper hasn't done that in North Carolina.
Nope, it flows from the states. It flows from the states.
Yep.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, also 5 days, it took Joe Biden 5 days to mobilize Fort Bragg or Fort Liberty, whatever you want to call it, right there. And they've got search and rescue operations that specialize in mountain search and rescue. And it took another 3 days, 8 days after the hurricane, to get them mobilized. There's a lot of blame to go around. And we've got the media in this circle the wagons mode because of the election coming up. And they're not willing to. But, Greg, it's well said, and you're absolutely right. The fallout is tremendous and deeply unfortunate that this is happening. Eric, welcome to the show. How are you?
Doing well. How are you?
Great. What's going on?
I just had a question on what would happen if a hurricane like this happened on November 4th or November 5th? Is there a contingency plan for the government as far as votes being cast in an affected area?
That's a great question. So I'm going to be somewhat speculative here, but there is real world precedent for this. The federal government doesn't actually have say over it because it's a state level function. And a state, I believe, could pause the election. And the reason I say that is because people forget September 11th, 2001 was election day in New York City. and the World Trade Center was an election precinct. I know this because not only is it true, but also my boss's daughter worked for the Board of Elections in New York City and was in the World Trade Center managing the polls when the planes hit. Got out safe and everything. But they paused the election and had a do-over a couple of weeks later. And I suspect in affected areas, the same sort of thing would happen, which, by the way, is a reason for everyone, particularly in Florida and in the Southeast, to go on and get an absentee ballot instead of trying to wait for Election Day to come in case there's something happening. Now, thankfully, the election is outside hurricane season. By then, it tends to be cold enough we're not going to get a hurricane, but we're about to get a massive hurricane. A Category 5 hurricane sweeping through the I-4 corridor in Florida. And it is, because it's so massive, going to have a lot of damage. We're 29 days from the election. Helene's going to impact North Carolina. And Milton, nobody has given him his stapler back, and he's pretty furious, and he's going to go into Florida looking for staplers. I'm sorry if you don't get the joke. These are going to be massive natural disasters, and that gets me to something. I wanted to talk about Kamala Harris here, but I gotta talk about this. I'm sorry, this is getting out of hand, guys. I realize it's cranks, but they're cranks who allege to be on the right. And because they're cranks who allege to be on the right, there's a level of disproportionate coverage. And I got to nip this in the bud. Candace Taylor she was a gubernatorial candidate in 2022. She's a bit of a crank. She's the one who thinks there's some conspiracy about globes in NASA. This is her tweet. The weather can and is being manipulated. Wake up. Stop being ignorant or plain stupid. There's no such thing as coincidences. The most important election in the history of America is 30 days away. Pray. Georgia voting has been compromised and don't know if we will be able to get all our early voting days in. Now a hurricane is coming straight for Florida. These two states are necessary for a Trump victory. No coincidence. God hides lions inside of sheep. I know you're in there somewhere. Make the terrified to cheat. This is our nation to lose or yours to keep. Okay. So here's the thing. Why does she not then think that it's God who's stopping Donald Trump from getting elected? She thinks that hurricanes are being controlled, the weather is being manipulated. God can control the storms. We can't. Unless you're an idol worshiper and you believe that your politicians are powerful enough to control the weather, in which case you're worshiping idols and you've attributed divine aspects of God to your political idols. That's possible. She's worshiping idols and so involved in politics. This comes after Marjorie Taylor Greene said the weather is being manipulated. Don't believe the people lying to you that it's not true. Apparently, if you tell the truth, you're a liar in Marjorie Taylor Greene's world. The devil is the father of lies, and all over social media, you got these nut jobs claiming that the weather is being manipulated. Now, let's be clear here at what's going on. And this is why some of these idiots make the left's job so easy. There is a trend that the New York Times has covered for some time, and it is called geoengineering. And you know what geoengineering is? They want to change the atmosphere to fill it up with sulfur dioxide to cause global cooling. Bill Gates has been wants to explore pumping pollution into the atmosphere, doing other things, trying to cool the oceans, things like that. It's called geoengineering. And I suspect what some of these simple people are doing is they're seeing these stories about geoengineering and thinking, aha, see now that they can't quite geoengineer to the extent they want. The New York Times essentially claims that if you oppose geoengineering, you're a conspiracy theorist. By the way, one of the things they want to do now is they want to try to find a way to save the Arctic ice. And so they want to use geoengineering. This is from the New Scientist headline. Geoengineering is now essential to saving the Arctic's ice. If we want to preserve the dwindling ice in the Arctic, cutting our emissions is no longer enough. We need to use geoengineering to refreeze the precious ecosystem. That's it. There are efforts to carbon capture, things like this. One of these solutions from startup Real Ice plans to use seawater to thicken the Arctic's ice. It's controversial. It's geoengineering of a sort. They will pump underwater salt water onto the existing ice, which will thicken the ice so it doesn't melt as quickly. It's geoengineering. I suspect what's happening is some of these idiots out there are taking these geoengineering stories and morphing them from scientists want to spread sulfur dioxide to shroud the planet to minimize the solar rays penetrating to, oh my gosh, they can steer a hurricane. There's somebody sent me this. What is it from Grant Cardone? Grant Cardone he's a private equity fund manager, big Trump guy. I grew up on the Gulf of Mexico, been watching storms since I was a young boy. I have never, in all caps, never seen a storm start here in the Western Caribbean and go east. Do you think government is using technology to manipulate weather patterns and storms? Y'all, these are three people, one of whom is an elected official, one of whom is fairly wealthy, and one of whom is just a redneck from Georgia. But they're prominent voices on the right suggesting the government is steering hurricanes. By the way, Tropical Storm Mindy in 2021, Tropical Storm Emily in 2017, and Tropical Storm Debbie in 2012 all started in the western Gulf of Mexico and moved east. So it has happened. In October, there have been 3 storms to form in the west and move east over the last 50 years. I don't know what's going on to people out there, but you are catechized by those you surround yourself with, and they are clearly being surrounded by crazy. And what's so useful to the left is the left wants to geoengineer. The left wants to spread air pollution to cool the earth. The left wants to engage in massive carbon recapture programs under the ocean in wild ways and build up the ice pack in the Arctic through geoengineering. And what's happening is these crazy people on the right come out and they say these wild and crazy things that the government can steer a hurricane. And it allows people on the left who want to do very dangerous things to say, look, no, that's crazy conspiracy talk. That's not what we're talking about. And it makes it easier to get away with this. The same thing happened in North Carolina. You have crazy people on the right giving these wild conspiracy theories about what isn't happening in North Carolina, stuff that's not happening. They're claiming it is, whether it's FEMA arrests or the like. And it allows the left to say, no, that's crazy talk. That's not happening. There's no evidence of that. Don't look over here. Don't look over here. Don't look over here. It's wild to see. And it's also, it's a sign of a mental illness spreading on the right in the same way that you have on the left gender wars where, I mean, people on the left really do think that a boy can become a girl, genitally mutilate himself and become a girl. You've got these people on the right thinking that the government can steer hurricanes now. It's the same sort of mental illness. The difference is that on the left, so many people in the media and culturally in Hollywood have been infected with the mental mind virus that it gets treated as normal and mainstream, and while the right continues to be fringe, it's all fringe. It's all fringe. Transgenderism is a fringe mental issue. So too is believing that the government can steer a hurricane. And the sane among us need support for each of us. I don't care whether you're on the left or the right here. You got crazy people out there, and when they start speculating that the government is steering hurricanes to the southeast United States during hurricane season to affect the outcome of an election, what really is going on beyond the mental issues is a deep, dark form of idolatry that predates Christian times. We've descended back into old world paganism where your idols have the power to control the weather. And it suggests a lot of these people professing Jesus with their mouth are actually worshiping Moloch instead. Now, let me tell you about Vision Computers before I get out of here. They want to build a computer for you. Not only do they want to build a computer for you, but they'll give you their 5-star service. So if you ever have a question about your computer, you call them 15 seconds or less, you get the answer faster than a Google search. Vision Computers can take care of you. And they don't put you on hold. They actually answer the phone. Call them at 404-COMPUTE. They'll build the computer for you. They're going to save you money. You're going to get one that's better than a big box from the computer store. From the big one-size-fits-all computer, it'll be exactly what you want and need. It's going to last you, and you get their 5-star service. Now, let's say you've got a computer, but it's not from Vision. For $179 a year, you too can get their 5-star service where you can call them, get an answer. They can remote in, fix your computer. They can help you with email. They can help you with printer. If you're in the gig economy, you're an independent contractor, you don't have an IT team, Vision can be your IT team. $175, $179 a year. Not a month, not a day, not a week, a year. And if you tell them Eric sent you, you save even more money. Give them a call, 404-COMPUTE, or go to visioncomputers.com. This hour of the program brought to you by First Liberty Building and Loan. Wherever you are nationwide, First Liberty is happy to help you. If you're buying a business, if you're building a business, if you're buying a franchise, if you need a heavy equipment loan, reach out to First Liberty. They might be able to help you. They make their own lending decisions. FirstLibertyGA.com. FirstLibertyGA.com. All right, the phone number here, 877-973-7425. Tom, want to go to you. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Hey, Rick. Thanks so much for taking my call. So we're talking about geoengineering. I think if you want to be liberal in that definition, we can talk about irrigation. So I got out my old Texas Instrument calculator that still works with the solar power little bar across the top, and I figured out how much the surface area of the planet is of water. And then I figured out, okay, how many gallons are in 1 inch of that surface? And I figured out how many gallons we would need to go across the widest part of Africa, which is that transition zone between the desert and the jungle. And it turns out that if you were to irrigate a 1-mile strip, it's 3,000 miles across, by desalinating it with the massive plants on the eastern and western sides of Africa, that you would take off, I can't remember exactly, but it was either a 16th or an eighth of an inch of the surface of the ocean. So Israel has the technology to do this. It would have to be scaled up massively, but the logic in it, I think, is pretty clear for us to see that if we irrigated 20 inches across that 1-mile strip right in that zone, we could grow some food. We could lower the ocean if we felt that was needed. We could do all those math calculations, and we wouldn't be throwing up chalk dust in the heavens to block the solar sky at night.
Funny you
and
say
hurting
that.
people like me who have pulmonary problems. Okay,
Tom,
so Mr.
there's actually an effort right now in the Sahel region that the grassland region that borders the Sahara. There's actually a committed project now to grow a series of trees across Africa, and people are really committed to it. And you can even at this point now zoom in on some of the latest satellites and see this band of trees that have been planted, essentially trying to green part of the Sahara because they think that might actually help alter the weather patterns, among other things there. And in fact, I don't know if you guys know this, but parts of the Sahara are in bloom right now. They've had massive heavy rainfall for the first time in eons, and parts of the Sahara have turned green. But it's that big desert in Africa that helps control our hurricane season, and you green it, you reduce the hurricanes. That would be global weather manipulation.